welcome to the CEC Report. It's June the 14th. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm with CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, the CEC's days of action to stop bail-in are the first shots in the battle. Caught out again, London banks are rigging the foreign exchange market. And who's spying on US citizens and lying about weapons of mass destruction to go to war? So first, the CEC's days of action to stop the bail-in are the first shots in the battle. Craig, I want to start this section with a bit of theme music to convey what we did this week.
Okay.
We fired our guns and the British kept a-coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
Thanks. So what we've done is we've fired a broadside on the British financial empire this week because we've exposed its bail-in plans for Australia, and specifically the press release and the reports we've done here on the Bank for International Settlements directing our regulator, APRA, to prepare a bail-in plan for here.
Which, Robbie, just so people know, this is what we've seen coming out of Cyprus, where people's deposits have been locked up. The entire economy has been shut down because there can be no commerce if you literally steal people's deposits.
And the Bank for International Settlements is coordinating this, but the idea came out of the Bank of England, out of the City of London heartland, because the plan, bail-in, is premised on preserving derivatives, the derivatives gambling bets in the world, and they are centred in the City of London. So this is what the British Empire is. It's a financial empire, and we went to war on it. Now what we did, and if we've got some footage, we'll put it up. We had mass distributions in front of the headquarters of all the major banks in Australia and the regulators and the Reserve Bank in the capital cities of Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra, Brisbane, Darwin and Perth. And on top of that we had stacks and stacks of people going to their local banks and going and seeing the managers of those branches to give them a copy of our flyer, Kill the BIS APRA bail-in plan before it kills you. Now, we caused freakouts from coast to coast, one end of the country to the other. We had people in pinstripe suits yelling at us, telling us we had no right to be there. I mean, we were literally stationed in front of these bank headquarters and giving the flyer to everyone going in, the employees, the customers, the whole kit and caboodle. We were telling them that this is the Cyprus plan coming to Australia. Lawfully, a lot of the citizens got alarmed, as they should. One of our people had a very good, when you're on the street, Craig, you're trying to attract people's attention. Everyone's busy. They don't go to work that day thinking they're going to be told this kind of news, so they've probably got their iPhone headset on or something like that. One of our people made the point that I wish I'd been doing this in Cyprus before the banks went under there. In other words, we have what we're doing now is before the fact, but we know the intentions there, and that's what made it important for us to be there. Now, we have certain ways of getting feedback about which we can't go through the details, but about the impact this has had, and we know that this rocked the finance industry of Australia to its very core, up to the highest levels of boardrooms. And there were emails apparently firing around all around Australia inside the financial sector, warning different branches about what the CEC was doing, don't talk to them, etc., and trying to keep a lid on it. But of course, this was the first salvo in blowing that lid off. So, Craig, that's what we did. And this is the beginning. Since we put out that release, though, which perhaps a lot of the viewers have already had a chance to see, what have we uncovered further about the plans for bail-in in Australia?
Well, Robbie, they're actually, from what we've been reading, they're actually quite advanced. I mean, look, if you go back and look at the Financial Stability Board's, the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority's own material, then you find the actual story. Now, back in 2009, Kevin Rudd was at the G20 meeting in London. He was part of the meeting that founded this idea of creating, out of the Bank of International Settlements, the Financial Stability Board. And its sole purpose was to, and I quote from the leader's statement, reshape our regulatory systems and to extend regulation and oversight to all systemically important financial institutions, instruments and markets, including systemically important hedge funds, there's where your derivatives come in, and to take action against non-cooperative jurisdictions. But really,
but hang on, that 2009, that's when the intention was to create the Financial Stability Board as the agency of a global financial dictatorship.
That's right, and that's actually a dictatorship. This is another salvo against the sovereignty of nations, because they intend, this is cross-border, this is the international Freemasonry of central banking coming together to destroy the capability of Australians to, or any other nation for that matter, to determine its own banking structures. Now, the point out of that Financial Stability Board's been writing a lot of documentation and so forth, but it came out, it said itself on the 15th of April, only a couple of months ago now, which is very close, in one of its documents saying that this concept of bail-in, right, this is what's happened in Cyprus. Well, in Australia, the legislation is in train for bail-in. Now, that means...
That was, what did you say, 15th of April?
The 15th of April, right? So that's as in. Now, what's bail-in? As I said, it's a bailing out of what they call GSIFIs, globally...
Systemically important financial institutions.
Well, we have DIFIs, which is basically domestic ones. Domestic ones.
4 big banks that are systemically important.
Yeah, look, and there's another fraud that's sort of been perpetrated on the Australian people, and this is the idea that all deposits in these banks are guaranteed. Well, the fact is that you have a financial claims scheme which supposedly covers people's deposits to $250,000. Well, that's all good on paper, Robbie, but it actually, from the Financial Stability Board's own papers, it says that the financial claims scheme cannot be used on the big 4 banks. So that then poses the question, well, where does that leave the big 4 banks? And what does the Australian regulatory authorities do about the potential of a big 4 bank going down? Well, actually, they've got very little they can do. I mean, you're talking about banks with deposits in excess of $250 billion, which is almost the entire debt of the Australian government. You have this sort of a problem on your doorstep. So what the regulatory authorities, through the likes of Glenn Stevens, who sits on the board of the...
steering committee of the FSB.
Yeah, that's correct. And he has spoken about the need for Australia to have bail-in capacity. You see that we've seen from their own writings that there's legislation trying to bring this in, because they intend to bring in bail-in powers on our big 4 banks, which means you're going to see Cyprus come to Australia. There is no doubt about it from their own writings that this is in fact the case. So, Robbie, that's the danger of what we face, is that's the intention, and that's what we've been telling people.
Now, Craig, we have a unique position because, as we've stated here before, you really see the crime here when you understand the alternative. And the alternative of Glass-Steagall, a banking separation, would solve all this in one fell swoop and protect everybody. But our other policy is for a national bank. And we have uncovered, you've got a very good historical comparison of the Banking Act today versus the Banking Act of Ben Chifley's main piece of legislation in the 1945, that Banking Act. And the difference in the way depositors were protected under each act. Yeah,
well, listen, Robbie, here it is. This is Chifley's banking regulations. This is the Banking Act of 1945. Very historical document. It's all centred in the Commonwealth Bank, basically functioning as a national bank. It's 25 pages long. Division 2, Part 11 says, and I quote, "It shall be the duty of the Commonwealth Bank to exercise its powers and functions under this division for the protection of depositors of the several banks." There was about 10 banks at that point.
No provisos?
No provisos.
No equivocations?
Protection of depositors. And they had the powers to wind banks up, to do it, whatever they had to do in order to protect those deposits. This is now the new legislation. This is a Banking Act of 1959.
It's called 1959, but it's been amended many times.
That's right. 260 pages long. Right? You go back to the section of this, Division 2, Protection of Depositors. Listen to what it says. APRA, not the Reserve Bank, not the Commonwealth Bank, but the APRA, because APRA was created as a separate institution to have prudential control.
APRA, which is regulated by the Bank for International Settlements.
That's right, because APRA follows to the letter what the international regulators do. It has many cross-board involvements. it says under first, and this is really interesting, under the first point of 12.1, it says it is the duty of APRA to exercise the powers and functions under this division for the protection of the depositors of the several ADIs and for the promotion of financial stability, system stability in Australia.
So that's a huge proviso they've put on that.
Yeah, because look, this is the basis upon which the Financial Stability Board in the first place came together. This is the international oversight, mantra. Under financial stability, we have the right to do anything we like, including steal people's deposits. So that's written in there. And look, if they get their way, Robbie, and try and shift the legislation, they have to take those sections out. Those historical sections, like the 1945 legislation, was put in there by Ben Chifley, and we'll most probably end up with legislation, something in the vicinity of this.
Yeah.
Totally unreadable. No one will read it. And with
they'll pass it out of fear.
They'll pass it out of fear, and they won't expect anyone to read it.
Yep.
And then they'll put this mantra on everyone's deposits are guaranteed, right, through this deposit guarantee fund. So what we're blowing a lid on, Robbie, is that we've caught it early, that this is where the Australian regulators intend to go. People's deposits aren't safe. Look at Cyprus, because that's the bottom line. That's the model for the world. Is
okay,
Cyprus.
one last thing. This is a battle to stop this. Exposing it isn't enough to stop it.
No.
The only way to stop it is to get Glass-Steagall introduced into the Australian Parliament as legislation, right?
And then most of these chapters of this old legislation will be written out, Robbie, and you go back to simple legislation, basically.
So we're on an all-out drive to get Glass-Steagall implemented, and what you, the viewer, have to do is front up your Member of Parliament and demand that's what they do. They need, Glass-Steagall is very simple to explain. If they tell you they don't understand it, then tell them they shouldn't be qualified to run for Parliament. It's very basic. They need to use their own personal responsibility as Member of Parliament to fight for that legislation to be introduced into the Australian Parliament. We can scrap all this other rubbish. It's the only thing that's going to stop this agenda dead. So stick with the mobilisation. We're only just beginning. We're run out of time. When we come back, we're going to talk about, lo and behold, another banking scandal out of London. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Caught out again. London banks are rigging the foreign exchange market. Craig, we call the City of London a lawless financial enclave, like the Somalia of the world economy, for a damn good reason. And we've just seen the latest example of it. I'll just remind people of the scandals out of London over the last 12 months that come from the fact that it is a lawless enclave. There are no rules. Things that are illegal in most other countries, they get away with in the City of London when it comes to the economy. So just in the last 12 months, 3 of the most significant banks in the world, including the Queen of England's personal bank, Coutts & Co., Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation and Standard & Chartered, were all caught in the last 12 months drug money laundering. And in the case of Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, it was so transparent, it's one of only 30 banks that was allowed to trade the US dollar, and of course you did it to launder money for Mexican drug lords, etc., that they all should have gone to jail. And it's when Obama's Attorney General was shown up for the fact they have a policy, not just too big to fail, but too big to jail, and they said, we cannot prosecute HSBC because that might bring down the global financial system.
Well, it would, Robbie, because if you go back to the early 80s, and the LaRouche published Dope Incorporated and showed how the banking system was implicitly involved in the drug trade, and that was a bestseller at that point.
Exactly, they knew what they were
They knew what they were doing, and that hasn't changed today. I mean, that's still the topic of discussion if you want to look at where does this money go from the drug trade.
All right. Another scandal in the last 12 months that relates to this latest one is the LIBOR rigging. Remember, there were 16 banks caught out, and here's the benchmark interest rate for the world, the London Interbank Offer Rate, that a quadrillion dollars worth of contracts were based on, right? And the public assumed that there's a market mechanism that finds its own equilibrium and sets this. And these 16 banks were colluding among themselves to rig it. There was no free market. Well, the latest is 5 whistleblowers have come forward to reveal that London banks trading in the world's biggest single and most liquid market, which is the foreign exchange market, that thing that's on people's news every night, the currency values, which is 4.7 trillion US dollars a day traded in this market. These London banks have been manipulating it. And according to Bloomberg on the 12th of June, quote, the world's biggest banks manipulated benchmark foreign exchange rates used to set the value of trillions of dollars of investment and derivatives, end quote. But they make the point that in particular, there are investments of pension funds all over the world. This has been going on for at least 10 years. What would happen is these banks, they are making deals on behalf of clients, right? And the deals would often involve, especially if you're moving money around the world, you got to transfer currencies from one to the other, and you want to know the rate. We've all been to the airport and swapped out. You know, what's the rate I'm going to get for this currency today? So you set the deal, you determine the rate, but then there's a little breathing space before the deal goes through at that rate. And what would happen is the banks, in that little breathing space time, would do their own trades on the foreign exchange market to manipulate the currency value up or down against their client's position. So they could make money out of that little breathing space beforehand. And so the poor mug client doesn't know that they have just been set up by their own bank to have the worst position. And what it shows you is that, see, we know this is the heart of the system. There is no such thing as a free market. The system's set up so this stuff could happen, especially in London. It's got to happen in London. But they rigged the system so that they can extract loot, right? That's how the free market has worked for the British for 200 years. Bloomberg was told by veteran traders, quote, that dealers colluded with derivatives counterparties to boost chances of moving the rates. The behaviour occurred daily in the spot foreign exchange market and has been going on for at least a decade, the two traders said. And of course, as I said, Craig, this is an echo of LIBOR itself because it was a similar kind of thing. But this is something that affects the lives, this foreign exchange stuff affects the lives of everybody every day, doesn't it?
We've just lost workers at the Ford factory, Robbie, because they say a lot of it's got to do with the
high dollar.
The high dollar, foreign exchange problems there. Everywhere you look, you've got this.
Every time the poor farmers go to export their crop, they get smashed with the currency.
Right. The problem is in a deregulated system, you're basically allowing the crooks to regulate the trade. Doesn't matter whether it's a gold or a silver of historical times. You have a financial oligarchy at the top, which is rigging everything for their own gain. And that's the way the system works. Now, the only solution you have to this is to go back to a sovereign nation state that has a government that says we are going to have a regulated system here. Our currency will be worth so much. And you get away from having all this speculative activity based upon simply a means of exchange.
Yep. Money
itself has no value. So therefore, why should you be making money off money? Why don't you make money off real goods? Well, see, that's where this whole system is breaking down, and that's why we've got to go back to a fully regulated system, exchange controls, full exchange controls, and get away from the floating dollar system whereby it's been nothing but casino gambling ever since.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Craig. Right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the latest serious scandals affecting Barack Obama and the danger of war as a result. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Finally, who's spying on US citizens and lying about weapons of mass destruction to go to war? As Yogi Berra said, Craig, it's deja vu all over again. The President of the United States is in charge at the head of an apparatus which is a full-blown police state against US citizens in the name of fighting terrorism, and has just announced, literally hours ago, and I'll get to that in a minute, that the red line has been crossed to go to war. In 2009, Lyndon LaRouche, the American statesman and economist, sparked an absolute uproar less than a year into Obama's presidency when he produced this image of Barack Obama. And you guys can see it on your screen. Now, he produced that in the context of Obamacare, the biggest fraud of Obama's image around the world. What people assumed was universal healthcare was a plot to bring in healthcare rationing run by private health insurance companies. It's basically mandated everyone has to sign up to private health insurance.
Directly modelled, Robbie, on Tiergarten 4, which was Hitler's program.
That's right.
That's why the moustache fits so nicely.
Yeah, and all the terms about death panels, etc., they're all right. People that lost their ability to determine their own health outcome. Now they should, the existing policy was terrible, but this is worse, what Obama's done. It's fascism to force people to sign up to private health insurance. There should have been a government program, which someone more like Hillary was pushing. So Lynn LaRouche went on after Obama on that. What's happened is now, despite everyone hating LaRouche for doing it, now, 5 years later, more and more people are realising that that is what Obama actually is. And if you look at the current list of scandals, his administration has presided over the Internal Revenue Service pursuing his political enemies, an actual enemies list with the power of the IRS, which is just a really intimidating power. Phone taps on journos, and in fact the journos who used to, kiss his butt are starting to realise, whoa, we've lost. We thought Bush was bad. He was nothing on this guy. And now the latest is this massive NSA, National Security Agency spying program, where just one company alone, Verizon, was ordered to spy on its 110 million customers, and apparently one general warrant was used to justify all this around the United States.
Yeah, Verizon, Robbie, is a phone company. So it's a bit
company.
like the government saying to Telstra, right, hand over all the records of your customers.
Yeah,
and that's what's happened here with 100 million people.
Yeah, and we will tap whoever we like at will, just on one warrant. Apparently, Craig, I think it's the Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution says that every citizen has to have due process. A general warrant to cover the whole country is not due process. This is Obama's White House justifying this, right? Now, so he has the same police state intention that Bush started, but he's gone much further than Bush. Now we're back to Syria again, because just hours ago the White House announced that the White House have proof that Assad used chemical weapons. We've talked about this a bit lately, but all the proof has come from the claims by the Israelis, the Brits and the French, right? It's Obama who said the use of chemical weapons is his red line for intervention, and now they're saying they have it. Is Obama, and doubtless he is, but we'll pose it rhetorically, is Obama going to war to change the subject of the economy, the crisis in the economy, and these other scandals that he's embroiled in? And just in the context of that, Saudi Prince Bandar, the man who put up the money for 9/11, we don't have time to explain that, but who is funding the jihadi Al-Qaeda people in Syria to topple Assad, while he's in France scheming with the French, the old former colonial masters of Syria, to try and work out a way they can stop the fact that, frankly, Assad's forces are beating this crowd, right? And if they can get America into it, that'll achieve that. Craig, they think they might start a local war, but isn't the risk here that they're going to have a confrontation between the superpowers?
Well, as we've said many times on this show, Robbie, Syria has bilateral agreements with Russia. Russia's supporting Syria because they see that Syria is being smashed, its sovereignty is being smashed, and that's the principle that they're supporting.
And what's Putin think of Obama?
Well, not very much. So the point is that this is a hair trigger for global war if you start talking about bringing in superpowers into the process.
But this would, and you've got to see this guy for what he is. He's racked by scandals. This would change the subject, but blow the world up. Run out of time. So thanks for tuning to this week's CEC Report. Tune in next week for more.